Anthony, I want to talk about the starters playing the first half alone, and Caleb Williams off to a rocky start at first, but finishes out strong with a successful 2-minute drive himself before halftime. Your reaction to what we saw tonight?
I honestly like the fact that the first half went the way it did for a number of reasons. One, when you look at the defensive side of the football, a number of the defensive starters were not out there. No Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker. Of course, no Jalen Johnson, as has been the case throughout the preseason so far. No Kyler Gordon, no Grady Jarrett. It's a number of players who we know the Bears are going to be counting on in big fashion who didn't even take the field today on the Bears defense. So Patrick Mahomes carved them up, and the Chiefs added the deep ball to their offense in a way that wasn't a part of their game plan very much last season. But offensively, to your point, Cass, it was a rough and rocky start for Caleb, for this Bears offense. The first two snaps, they started to go backwards. You know, you have a botched handoff, you have a penalty on this year's first-round pick, and then you're way behind the chains on third down after that. But I do like the fact that they were put in a position where they had to respond, and they did on those last couple of drives in the first half. Really started to get something cooking, and I think that at least puts them in a position now where over the next 17 days where, you know, they're not necessarily feeling themselves in the same way. They recognize there's still a lot of work to do.
I would love to know what Ben Johnson's plan was heading into this game, of how much he wanted to play his starters, and if the fact that those two first drives didn't go the way he wanted to, he's like, I'm going to throw him back out there, especially because Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offensive starters were still out there as well. But you mentioned the response, and I feel like that's been a theme with Caleb Williams throughout all of training camp, because it hasn't been a smooth sailing ride for him going from day one when the first team offense got kicked out of a drill. And then I go back to the Dolphins joint practice where he threw an interception on his first throw in 11-on-11. And then he responded, finding Olamide Zaccheaus. He found Colston Loveland, Rome Odunze, and you saw him respond in those moments. And Ben Johnson talked after last game about stacking days. He felt like Caleb Williams had 3 really good practices, and he needed that heading into the Bills preseason game. And then to see him kind of take a step back in the early series today and then go on and have that 2-minute drive, find Rome Odunze, and go to Rome Odunze after he had a drop as well. I thought that was a promising step forward, just because we know they're going to see that at points throughout the season, especially as they went up against Chiefs starters, which is a different skill set and a different beast than going up against the Bills twos. I want to go out to Lou Canellis. He is standing outside the Bears locker room out at Arrowhead Stadium. Lou, I want to get your reaction. You were standing on the sidelines for this game. What were your takeaways?
Well, let me tell you, the reaction here outside of the locker room has been a sight to see. It may be only an exhibition game, but I'll tell you what, a lot of high fives, a lot of fist bumps. These guys took it seriously, you know, with that touchdown pass at the very end. Let me break it into a couple of halves and really talk about the storyline that you just mentioned. That was response. And Ben Johnson had to be happy with the way his team responded at the end of the first half after struggling, and then here at the end of the game. At the end of the first half, obviously Caleb Williams puts that 7-play, 78-yard drive together. Big pass to Rome Odunze for 37 yards, then the 3-yard touchdown pass to Odunze. But also in that drive, he scrambles for 18 yards. And I was right there on the sideline when he ran out of bounds, and he looked like he was getting the juice, like he was feeling it, like he felt like this offense was finally starting to roll. We saw what Bagent did at the end of the game, threw for over 200 yards and the 3 touchdowns. And this is after Ben Johnson at halftime told the radio team, whatever happened in the first half was not our brand of football. He was not happy with the way his team played in the first half. But they came back again at the end of that first half. Big A just mentioned a number of defensive starters out. You go up against a team like Kansas City, you can't afford to play without your secondary out there. You can't afford to play without a Grady Jarrett. Yeah, it's no surprise going against Patrick Mahomes, who looked like he was in midseason form, that your defense would only come up with 1 quarterback hit. But the team hung in there, and then the seconds and thirds in the second half took over to bring home the win. So I think it was a great learning experience for the Bears. Listen, they went up in class tonight. You play Miami, Buffalo, but only the 2s and 3s. Okay. Tonight, you played the best team in football over the last 6 years. They've been to the Super Bowl 5 times and won 3 of them. It was a good test for this team, and I like the way they fought back, guys.
And Lou, since you got to be there, you were on the sidelines watching it all play out, and we're all just sort of still getting to know Ben Johnson here. What was the tone in the first half when the defense was getting carved up and when the offense was struggling early? Because the talk this past week was everyone sort of recognizing that Ben Johnson a little more subdued in-game action than he is during practice. What were your observations of how he handled the first half?
Well, I thought Ben Johnson was just very calm, despite what was happening in the first half and his team falling behind by 17. His players, though, Big A, were angry on the sidelines. Guys wondering why things weren't happening, why they were coming up the Chiefs with the big play. You touched on it. Mahomes rolling out of the pocket, not getting touched, finding open receivers downfield. The defense was not happy, but they kept huddling up, trying to come up with a way to stop Kansas City's explosive offense. Didn't really happen because Mahomes left the game after 3 series, and he seemed to have his way while out there. I saw his numbers. Boy, he had 12 first downs on just 20 snaps for almost 200 yards, but the defense learned from the experience against a guy like Mahomes and will be better for it later in the regular season.
Well, I want to get into the secondary a little bit because the good news is they've said multiple times now that Jalen Johnson is on track to return for week 1. Important when you're going up against a guy like Justin Jefferson.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have Kyler Gordon returned to practice on Wednesday, didn't play in this game, but another key piece to this secondary and a huge difference maker on this defense. But throughout training camp, we've watched Nahshon Wright get all the reps with the ones. He seemingly walked in his 3rd year, a little bit of a journeyman, played in Dallas, played in Minnesota. And he seemed to stack up, but then you see this man-to-man coverage come alive against ones in a game, and he got beat. First off, he had the 29-yard penalty on those 2 penalties he got on the first drive, and then gets beat on that 58-yard pass. Is this a skill set thing where some guys just aren't cut out to play that man-to-man defense that Dennis Allen wants to bring?
Well, I think it does just end up testing the depth of the Bears' secondary, their corner position. You know, even a guy like Kyler Gordon, he's shown himself as one of the top nickels in the sport. But Kyler Gordon lined up outside because I've certainly heard that question come up a bit in Chicago media, whether or not Kyler Gordon, because he's just gotten this new contract, should you just line him up wide at the opposite corner, opposite Jalen Johnson? We haven't necessarily seen that that's the strength of Kyler Gordon, just to be out wide on an island, locked up in man coverage, almost, exclusively on some of the top receivers in the sport. His superpower is his versatility. He can show blitz. He can get from one quadrant of the field all the way to somewhere else. He can be physical against the run. And yes, he's effective in coverage in a variety of areas around the field. But you don't want to necessarily just have Kyler Gordon lined up wide. There's frankly just a few guys in the sport that are exceptional at doing that. The Bears' next best option, in my opinion, is Tyreek Stevenson. That's why he's likely to be the opposite corner, starting on the other side away from Jalen Johnson. Losing Terrell Smith in the previous preseason game for the season, that does sap some of that depth. But overall, it's a secondary that I don't have a lot of concerns about yet. We did see them without one of their starting defensive linemen, without multiple of their starting players in the secondary. I've been really impressed, and you've been there at Hallis Hall in person a lot, with the safety position, the way that Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard have made a lot of plays on the ball. So I'm encouraged by that. Again, tonight, you're on the road against KC, and Pat Mahomes looked like MVP caliber Patrick Mahomes. So, I wouldn't read too much into it yet.
And well, Jaquan Brisker obviously wants to get paid at the end of this season. And then he said that just him and Byard have developed this chemistry since they've been playing together for years. So it's almost like unspoken at this point, where they can look at each other and know where each other wants to be and plays well on the field. And I think we've seen that come alive in the joint practices, and for actually both, but Brisker in particular, for him, it's all about staying healthy and staying on the field, because Dennis Allen has said he's a guy that, if you're on an offense, you have to game plan against him. So they need him to just be available, and that's the biggest thing. Now, he's also said that he doesn't feel like he's playing any differently given his concussion history. He's ready to go out there and just be himself. So you hope that he can stay out there, because we also know the impact that he has. We saw the drop-off in the defense last year when he got hurt and when Andrew Billings got hurt. Andrew Billings also adding 20 pounds of muscle this offseason. That seems a little bit scary. All right, you just heard from head coach Ben Johnson, who was pretty honest, saying he was disappointed in how the first team offense and defense started the game. He said defensively didn't control the line of scrimmage, had costly penalties, and couldn't stop them in the red zone, and just called the first 2 offensive possessions sloppy. Now, he did mention they really kind of found out what kind of road team they're going to be going into a loud environment, especially one like Arrowhead. How much pressure does that put on a young quarterback?
I mean, when you're at Arrowhead Stadium, and especially when you've got the pressure of that opposing offense led by the best player in football coming at you, then yes, it can be daunting. And so we saw, the sort of, miscue that was there on the opening handoff of the game, and then we saw Colston Loveland jump off sides. It did seem like the offense as a whole was fairly disjointed starting off the game on that opening series. And that's a part of the frustration you hear in Ben Johnson's voice, because he said we walked through all the openers. And so these are plays that we've repped more than any other plays in our playbook throughout the week here to prepare for what that first series, those first couple of series in the game, frankly, are going to look like. And they just weren't locked in quite yet. Then as they got rolling, then things really seemed to settle in for the Bears offense. But those first couple of series, especially the very first series, those initial 2 snaps, you understand why it was kind of frustrating. Like Caleb Williams was just talking about a moment ago, he will learn from this. The offense will learn from this. There are things that they can look at on film. And we even saw them respond tonight, which I think was an important point as well, because it started off rocky. I did like that Ben Johnson got the offense into a rhythm by utilizing DeAndre Swift, utilizing some quick game. You think about Jared Goff, his quarterback in Detroit the last few seasons. He would have to slow Jared Goff down and get him into a rhythm in a number of games using that fantastic Lions rushing attack and what they could do with their quick game with some precision from receivers like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's not necessarily foreign territory, and Ben Johnson is now just in his first road contest coaching the Chicago Bears. So it certainly didn't look like last week did from a starting the game perspective, but I think perspective is important on this because it is the final preseason game, and these guys are really just figuring these things out together.
I don't know if you heard this or not. There was a clip of Lions players, I think it was this past week, talking about how they had seen the script that Ben Johnson called against the Bills game before, and Ben Johnson was like, yeah, we don't game plan for these preseason games. These are all just things that we are trying to install and work on throughout the preseason to make sure we're primed for the regular season. At the start of training camp, he called this a race to week 1. Now they have 17 days to get ready for prime time. What are the most essential things that you feel like they need to work out between now and that Monday night opener against Minnesota?
Well, like we saw tonight, the issues with the starters. I mean, starting slow was an epidemic for the Bears last year over and over again. And so that's one of the things that was very gratifying about seeing the way they handled last week against the Buffalo Bills, because the offense came out firing early, moved the ball well. Their quarterback looked like he was on top of every detail and every mechanic. That didn't look to be the case tonight, not only with their QB, but with their receivers as well. And so you want to make sure everyone is going to be on the same page headed towards that opener. And then in the end, you're going to have additional veterans who are going to be out there. We haven't seen Joe Thuney in the lineup yet. We just saw them get DeAndre Swift lathered up a little bit in tonight's game. And there's certainly going to be some Ben Johnson tricks of the trade. And so whatever he's doing with the game plan, with the schematics of this Bears offense, it's going to be a lot that we haven't seen so far in the preseason. But all these opportunities over the next 17 days to get those extra reps, the Bears are going to have to make them pay off.
All right, well, if we point out some good things that happened in this game, one, the comeback win, 29-27, and 2 successful a game-winning drive, and then a 2-minute drive at the end of the first half. Cutdown day is on Tuesday. The Bears have to take their roster from 90 to 53. A bunch of fringe guys hoping to make it. Also opportunities on the practice squad. But I still think the big question is who is going to be the Bears starting left tackle. Braxton Jones. He has the most experience. He's now playing with the ones more consistently. Is he the answer?
For now, yes. I mean, Theo Benedict, he certainly has shown that he's got some physical potential, but he did show me tonight, especially in the early series that he was out there, that there's still some growth that needs to happen. So Braxton Jones is their best option at left tackle for now. He's got a couple of weeks to continue to get healthier before they get to the opening game of the season.
Well, Ben Johnson said this could be something that also goes into the season because they want someone to jump out there and take it, and they haven't quite seen that yet, although it seems to be playing itself out.